Emma Hastings had never meant to open the drawer. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, one of those early autumn days when the sun slanted through the curtains in golden strips, and the whole house seemed to breathe in a rhythm of stillness. Daniel had already left for work, the children were at school, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. Emma had come into her mother-in-law's room simply to gather some fresh linens. Her mother-in-law, Margaret Hastings, was staying with them temporarily, or so Daniel had said. Just a few months, until she feels better. But a few months had stretched into nearly a year. Margaret's presence lingered like perfume that refused to fade, sharp, insistent, impossible to ignore. Emma told herself she was only tidying, only making space. Margaret's dresser, however, had always been a forbidden territory. The polished oak drawers seemed to glare at her whenever she passed by, whispering silently, "Not yours. Don't touch." But that morning, as she replaced a stack of folded towels in the closet, Emma noticed the bottom drawer of the dresser was slightly ajar. Not wide, just enough for the edge of a yellowed envelope to peek out, like a tongue daring her to taste a secret. Her heart gave a small, traitorous flutter. She bent down. The drawer stuck at first, reluctant to reveal itself, but with a gentle tug it slid open. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, tied together with faded blue ribbon. The paper was brittle at the edges, like something too old to belong in this century. Emma froze. She hadn't meant to snoop. She could close the drawer now, pretend she had never seen it. But her fingers betrayed her, reaching, trembling, untying the ribbon. The top envelope bore Daniel's name. "My dear son Daniel." Emma's stomach clenched. She slid the paper out and unfolded it carefully. Margaret's handwriting unfurled across the page, neat and precise, like a schoolteacher's script from another era. And then Emma began to read. "Daniel, my beloved son, I fear for you. I fear that the woman you call your wife does not truly care for you. She manipulates your kindness. She drains your spirit. She will never be the wife you deserve. I see the cracks already forming, and I pray you will open your eyes before it is too late." Emma's breath caught. She read on, each sentence cutting deeper. There was no subtlety in Margaret's words, only venom dressed in polite phrasing. Emma was painted as selfish, cold, unworthy. The letter ended with a chilling suggestion. Perhaps it is time to consider whether this marriage was ever meant to last. You could do better. You should do better. Emma pressed the page to her chest, as though to stop the sting from spreading. Her pulse raced in her ears. She shuffled through the other envelopes, half a dozen, maybe more. All addressed to Daniel. None mailed. Each one, she realized, must hold more of the same poison. Her throat tightened. She could almost hear Margaret's voice echoing in the words, that cool, measured tone she used at family dinners whenever she corrected Emma's choices, the meals she cooked, the clothes she wore, the way she raised her children. Emma had endured the criticism silently for years, chalking it up to generational differences. But this was not just criticism. This was war, waged in ink and paper. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted her. Emma nearly dropped the letters. She stuffed them back into the drawer, fumbling with the ribbon. Her palms were damp, her breath shallow. She pushed the drawer shut just as Margaret's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Emma." The older woman's voice floated in, smooth as silk. "Are you in here?" Emma swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. "Yes, just changing the sheets." Margaret entered, regal in her pale cardigan, her silver hair arranged in perfect waves. She surveyed the room with eyes that missed nothing. "How thoughtful of you. Though you really shouldn't trouble yourself." Emma forced a smile. "It's no trouble." Margaret's gaze lingered on the dresser. Just for a moment. And Emma wondered, did she know? Had she always known her secrets were one curious glance away? The silence stretched. Then Margaret smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're a good girl," she said. "Trying so hard." Emma's hands tightened on the sheets. She wanted to scream, "Good girl?" After reading those letters, the words tasted like mockery. But she said nothing. Not yet. As Margaret left the room, Emma stood rooted to the floor, her chest tight with unspoken fury. The discovery had changed something. The walls of the house felt closer, the air heavier. For the first time in her marriage, Emma wasn't sure if she could trust the foundation beneath her feet. Because now she knew, every smile, every polite gesture from her mother-in-law concealed a darker truth. And hidden in that drawer lay the evidence, unsent letters that could unravel her entire life. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Daniel lay beside her, his breathing deep and steady, one arm draped across his chest. He always slept easily, slipping into dreams as if the day's burdens had no claim on him. Emma envied that about him, his ability to close the world out with a flick of his eyelids. But tonight, she lay stiff on her side, staring at the ceiling. The letters whispered in her mind, their venom curling through the dark. She will never be the wife you deserve. Perhaps it is time to consider whether this marriage was ever meant to last. She pressed a fist to her mouth to keep from crying. She had to know more. One letter was terrible enough, but what if the others were worse? What if Margaret had been writing these things for years, slowly feeding poison into Daniel's ears whenever she could? Emma slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. Her bare feet padded softly across the floor as she pulled her robe tight. Down the hallway, past the children's rooms, into the guest bedroom where Margaret slept. The house was still. The only sound was the groan of old floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator below. Emma eased the drawer open again. The ribbon was still loose from earlier, the stack of envelopes waiting. She slid out the second one. My dear son, I worry that Emma does not respect you. I see the way she interrupts you when you speak, the way she dismisses your ideas. This is not love, Daniel, it is control. She undermines you in front of others, and it breaks my heart. I fear she will diminish you until there is nothing left. Emma's lips parted in a silent gasp. She sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping the paper so hard her knuckles whitened. It wasn't true. She didn't disrespect Daniel. She adored him, leaned on him, built her life around him. Didn't she? The letter slithered into her doubts, twisting them. She remembered the last dinner party, when Daniel had suggested painting the kitchen yellow and she had laughed it off, saying it would look like a school bus. Everyone had laughed with her. Daniel had smiled, but had it been forced? Emma rubbed her temples. No, she whispered. That's not how it was. But once the seed was planted, she couldn't stop remembering. Little moments. Little comments. Times when she had brushed him aside without thinking. Margaret's words magnified them until they seemed enormous, unforgivable. She reached for another letter. Daniel, I have tried to hold my tongue, but I cannot. Emma is not kind. She speaks sweetly in public, but in private I see her coldness. She will never truly put your needs before her own. A wife must build her husband up, not tear him down. I beg you to reconsider before it is too late. Emma's breath hitched. Was this what Margaret really thought of her? That she was unkind, selfish? She wanted to rip the letter in half, to shred it until the words no longer existed. But she couldn't. These weren't just words. They were judgments. A record of how Margaret had always seen her. She read 3 more letters, each one sharper, crueler than the last. In every one, Margaret chipped away at her character, painting her as manipulative, cold, unworthy. By the time Emma returned them to the drawer, her hands were trembling. The silence of the room pressed on her chest like a weight. Back in her bedroom, she slipped beneath the covers. Daniel stirred, mumbling in his sleep, then settled again. Emma lay rigid, her heart pounding. She turned her head and studied his profile in the moonlight. The strong jaw, the peaceful brow. The man she had married. And suddenly, she saw him differently. What if he already believed the words in those letters? What if Margaret had said them to his face, day after day, until they seeped into his thoughts? What if the distance she had felt lately, the shorter kisses, the distracted nods, wasn't work stress at all, but doubt? Emma's throat closed. She wanted to wake him, shake him, demand, do you believe her? Do you think I'm cold? Do you think I'm tearing you down? But she didn't. She lay still, her hands gripping the blanket. Because asking might confirm her worst fear, that the poison had already taken root. The next morning, Emma moved through the kitchen like a ghost. She fried eggs, buttered toast, poured coffee. The children chattered at the table, Daniel read the paper, and Margaret hummed softly as she sliced fruit. Everything looked normal. Ordinary. But Emma felt the letters pulsing in her mind, like a second heartbeat. When Daniel kissed her cheek before leaving for work, she searched his eyes desperately for some sign, love, doubt, contempt. His gaze was warm but distracted, already halfway out the door. And that somehow hurt even more. That afternoon, Emma sat in the garden, the cool breeze lifting strands of her hair. She tried to read a novel, but the words blurred. All she saw were Margaret's sentences, looping in her head. "You're quiet today," Margaret said, stepping onto the patio with a glass of iced tea. Emma stiffened. "Just tired." Margaret smiled, settling into the chair beside her. "Marriage can be exhausting, can't it? Always giving, always compromising." Emma swallowed hard. "It's worth it." "Of course," Margaret murmured, her eyes glinting. "If you have the right partner." The words were casual, almost kind. But Emma heard the undertone, sharp as broken glass. And for the first time, she realized, Margaret wasn't just writing those letters. She was living them, planting seeds in every conversation, every look, every pause. Emma set her book down, her pulse racing. This wasn't just family tension. This was a campaign, a quiet war. And Emma was in the middle of it. Emma had always believed that her marriage, though imperfect, was steady, like an oak tree weathering seasons, bending but never breaking. But after reading the letters, every moment with Daniel felt different, fragile, as if a hidden rot had already set in beneath the bark. That Friday evening, the Hastings house was unusually quiet. The children were at a sleepover, and Margaret had retreated early to her room with a migraine. It was just Emma and Daniel at the dinner table, the candles flickering between them. Emma had cooked his favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary, garlic mashed potatoes, and green beans. She had hoped it might spark the warmth they used to share. But Daniel seemed distracted, poking at his food, his phone buzzing every few minutes with work emails. "Long day?" she asked, her voice soft, searching. He murmured, not looking up. "Just deadlines." Emma studied him. The letters replayed in her mind. She interrupts you. She dismisses you. She diminishes you. She hesitated, then said, "Do you ever feel like I don't listen to you enough?" Daniel glanced up, startled. "What? No. Where is this coming from?" "I don't know," Emma said quickly, forcing a laugh. "Just wondering." He frowned slightly, then reached across the table and touched her hand. "Emma, you're overthinking again. You always listen. You're the one who keeps this family together." The words should have comforted her. But his eyes slipped back to his phone before she could believe them. Later that night, they sat side by side on the couch. Daniel watched highlights from a football game, while Emma pretended to scroll through a magazine. The air between them felt too wide, a gulf she couldn't cross. "Remember when we used to talk like this?" she said suddenly. Daniel looked at her. "Like what?" "Like, about everything. Your dreams, my worries. We'd stay up half the night, just talking." He smiled faintly. "That was before kids. Before work got crazy." Emma's throat tightened. "Do you miss it?" "Of course," he said, eyes drifting back to the TV. The flickering light painted his face in shadows, and for the first time in years, Emma wondered if they were drifting too far apart to ever find their way back. The next morning, Emma overheard something that rattled her even more. She had gone upstairs to fold laundry when she heard voices through Margaret's half-open door. Daniel's deep murmur, his mother's sharper tone. "She doesn't always understand you," Margaret was saying. "I see the way she brushes past your feelings." Emma froze, her breath caught. Daniel's reply came after a pause. "She's just tired, Mom. She's been holding a lot together." "But you deserve more than just tired," Margaret pressed. "You deserve someone who builds you up, not wears you down." Emma's chest clenched. Those were the same words from the letters. Daniel's voice dropped, softer now. "Mom, please, don't start." Emma backed away before she could hear more, her hands trembling as she clutched the basket of laundry. She fled to the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. So Margaret had said those things to him. Not just on paper. Not just unsent. She had spoken them aloud. And Daniel, he hadn't argued. He hadn't disagreed. He had only asked her to stop. Emma pressed her palms to her face. The letters were no longer hidden whispers, they were becoming reality. That evening, Emma tried to reclaim her marriage. She lit candles, poured wine, and slipped into the silk dress Daniel had once said made her look like the woman he fell in love with. When Daniel walked into the room, he smiled faintly. "Wow. You look amazing." Emma's heart lifted. "Then come sit with me." For a while, it felt almost normal. They laughed about an old college memory, clinked glasses, shared a soft kiss. But just as Emma began to relax, Daniel's phone buzzed again. He reached for it automatically, his attention pulled away. Emma's smile faltered. "Couldn't it wait?" she asked, sharper than intended. Daniel sighed. "It's work, Emma. You know I can't ignore it." "But you can ignore me?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. His brow furrowed. "That's not fair." Her chest ached. She thought of the letters, of Margaret's accusations. "She undermines you. She controls you." And suddenly she saw herself through his eyes, nagging, desperate, demanding. She pushed her chair back and stood. "I'm sorry. Never mind." Daniel rubbed his temples, weary. "Emma, I don't want to fight." Neither did she. But it felt as though the fight had already begun, quiet, invisible, seated by words not even her own. That night, as Daniel slept, Emma lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The cracks were forming. She could feel them. Tiny fractures in the foundation of her marriage, spreading with every whispered word, every unsent letter. And she knew, if she didn't find a way to stop it, the whole house might come crashing down. Margaret Hastings had always carried herself like a queen. Even when she wasn't speaking, her presence filled the room, commanding, assessing, silently demanding that everyone measure up to her standards. Emma had noticed it the very first time she met her. She was only 22 then, freshly engaged to Daniel, eager and nervous. She remembered walking up the steps of Margaret's stately colonial house in Connecticut, clutching a bouquet of tulips. Daniel had squeezed her hand and whispered, "Don't worry, she'll love you." But the moment Margaret opened the door, Emma felt judged. Margaret's eyes flicked over her dress, her shoes, her trembling smile. The verdict was silent, but unmistakable, not enough. Dinner that night was a test. Margaret asked polite questions, but there was an edge to them. Where did Emma's family come from? What did her father do for a living? Had she considered how hard marriage to a man like Daniel might be? Emma answered as best she could, blushing, fumbling, but Daniel never seemed to notice. He laughed with his mother, passed the potatoes, carried on as if nothing were amiss. By the end of the evening, Emma was exhausted, but relieved she had survived. She told herself Margaret just needed time. Surely, once she saw how happy Daniel was, she would soften. She never did. Over the years, Margaret's presence wove itself into every corner of their marriage. When Daniel got his first promotion, Margaret was the first person he called, not Emma. When they bought their first house, Margaret arrived with swatches of paint and lists of suggested improvements. When Emma gave birth to their daughter, it was Margaret who insisted on holding the baby first, brushing past Emma as if she were merely a vessel. Emma learned to bite her tongue, to smile politely while her insides twisted. But sometimes, late at night, she asked Daniel, "Do you see it? How she treats me?" Daniel would sigh and pull her close. "She's just set in her ways. You know how she is. Don't take it personally." But Emma did take it personally. Every comment, every correction felt like a tiny cut. And over time, those cuts left scars. Now, sitting in the dim kitchen with a cup of tea, Emma replayed those memories. The letters had only confirmed what she already suspected. Margaret didn't just disapprove of her, she despised her. And worse, Daniel couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. Emma's hands shook as she lifted her cup. She thought about the conversation she had overheard, Margaret whispering to Daniel that Emma wore him down. It wasn't new. It was the same pattern, over and over. Margaret didn't just want to be part of their lives. She wanted control. That Sunday, during brunch, Emma saw the grip in action. The family gathered around the dining table. The children chattered about school projects, Daniel carved ham, and Margaret sat at the head of the table as if it were her rightful throne. "Daniel," Margaret said sweetly, "I've been thinking. You've been working far too hard. Perhaps you should come stay with me for a few days. The city is stressful. You'd sleep better." Emma's fork clattered against her plate. "Stay with you," she blurted. Margaret's eyes flicked to her, cool and sharp. "Just until he regains his strength. He always rested so well at home." Emma opened her mouth, but Daniel chuckled nervously. "Mom, I'm fine." "Nonsense. You've lost weight. Look at you." "Emma, don't you agree he's been overworked?" The question was a trap, and Emma knew it. If she said yes, she was incompetent for not caring for him. If she said no, she was blind to his needs. "I think," Emma said carefully, "that we can take care of each other right here." Margaret's smile was tight. "Of course. If you say so." But Emma heard the unspoken words beneath it, "You'll never be enough for him." That night, as Emma brushed her teeth, she caught her reflection in the mirror, her tired eyes, the faint lines etched by years of stress. For the first time, she wondered if Margaret was right. If she really wasn't enough. She turned to Daniel, who was scrolling through his phone in bed. "Do you ever feel like your mother wants you back? Like she doesn't want to let go?" Daniel looked up, surprised. "Emma, she's just protective." "Protective?" Emma's voice cracked. "She's trying to pull you away from me. From us." He sighed. "You're reading too much into it." Emma stared at him, her heart sinking. He didn't see it. He never had. And that was Margaret's power, the invisible grip she held on him, strong enough that he couldn't even recognize the chains. Later that week, Emma returned to the drawer. She pulled out another letter, her hands trembling. "Daniel, she will never care for you as I do. A mother's love is unconditional. A wife's is not. One day you will see the truth, and I only pray it won't be too late to save you." Emma dropped the paper as if it had burned her. The words weren't just cruel, they were a declaration. Margaret didn't see Emma as a partner for Daniel. She saw her as a rival. And in Margaret's eyes, a wife could never win against a mother. Silence had a way of filling the Hastings household. Not the peaceful kind, like the hush of snow falling outside or the quiet after a child's laughter. No, this silence was sharp, jagged, and heavy. It lived in the pauses between words, in the glances that lingered too long, in the spaces where kindness should have been. Emma felt it most at the dinner table. That Wednesday evening, the family sat down to eat together. The children chatted about their school projects, their voices bright and innocent, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Emma placed a bowl of pasta on the table, her special recipe, the one Daniel had once declared his favorite. "Smells good," Daniel said, though he didn't look at her. Margaret twirled a forkful and took a bite. Her lips pressed together. "Interesting," she murmured. Emma's pulse quickened. "Is something wrong?" "Oh no." Margaret dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "Just different. My recipe uses fresh basil. It really makes the flavor sing." Daniel chuckled lightly, not noticing the sting in the words. "Mom's right, Emma. You should try her version sometime." Emma's chest tightened. She wanted to shout, "This is my version. This is my home. This is my family." But she bit her tongue, her smile frozen. The children, oblivious, kept talking. Emma chewed slowly, the food turning to ash in her mouth. After dinner, Emma collected the plates. Margaret sat back in her chair, regal and untouched by the work of clearing dishes. Daniel excused himself to take a phone call. In the kitchen, the clatter of dishes was louder than usual. Emma's hands trembled as she scrubbed. She could still hear Margaret's interesting echoing in her mind. One word, but heavy enough to crush. When Daniel returned, he leaned against the counter. "Mom didn't mean anything by it. You know how she is." Emma spun around, water dripping from her hands. "Why do you always defend her? Do you ever defend me?" Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Emma, please. Don't make this a fight." Her throat burned. "It already is." The days that followed were filled with small battles, unspoken wars fought in smiles, in silences, in carefully chosen words. When Emma set out her daughter's clothes for school, Margaret would say, "Oh, that color washes her out. I'll find something better." When Emma mentioned signing the kids up for soccer, Margaret would murmur, "Are you sure they're not too delicate for such a rough sport?" When Emma suggested a weekend trip, Margaret would sigh, "Daniel's so tired. Perhaps he'd prefer a quiet weekend at home." Each comment was a stone added to Emma's chest, until she could barely breathe. And Daniel? He never seemed to notice. Or maybe he noticed and chose not to see. One evening, After another tense dinner, Emma sat alone in the living room. The house was dark except for the flickering lamplight. She held one of the letters in her lap, the edges crumpled from her grip. "She undermines you in front of others." The words mocked her. She thought of the pasta, of the clothing, of every subtle jab. Margaret was building her case, brick by brick, and Emma was running out of ways to fight back. Her son wandered in, clutching a stuffed animal. "Mommy, why are you sad?" Emma forced a smile, pulling him close. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just tired." But as she held him, she realized the truth. She was tired, not of motherhood, not of marriage, but of fighting silent battles she never seemed to win. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. Emma had planned a family outing to the park. She packed sandwiches, juice boxes, sunscreen. She imagined laughter, fresh air, a moment of peace. But as they were about to leave, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Daniel, darling, could you drive me to the pharmacy instead? I'm feeling faint." Daniel glanced at Emma. "Maybe we can reschedule the park?" Emma's chest burned. "We've been planning this all week." Margaret sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her temple. "It's fine. I'll manage alone." Daniel frowned. "Don't be ridiculous, Mom. I'll take you." And just like that, the picnic was gone. Emma stood frozen, the basket in her hands. The children's faces fell. Margaret's eyes met hers, cool and triumphant. It wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a war, and Emma was losing ground. That night, Emma lay awake, staring into the darkness. The letters, the whispers, the silences, they were all pieces of the same puzzle. And the picture they formed terrified her. If she didn't fight back, Margaret wouldn't just take her husband's attention. She would take her marriage, her family, her place in the home Emma had built. And Emma wasn't sure how much longer she could hold the line.